Have you ever wondered what pushes a normally calm, quiet person to finally snap and wage a silent war against someone who refuses to respect even the simplest boundary? That question echoed in my mind the day everything changed. Because before the spike strips, before the shouting, before the HOA meetings filled with fake smiles and simmering rage, I was just a tired farmer trying to make an honest living on the land my father left me. A place that should have been peaceful. A place that should have been mine. But peace doesn't survive long when someone like Karen discovers a shortcut. It started with tire tracks thin, fresh, and slicing diagonally across the soft dirt like someone had carved disrespect directly into my land. At first, I thought it was teenagers messing around. Or maybe a lost tourist. But the tracks kept appearing. And they weren't random. They formed a pattern, a route. Someone was using my farm as a personal road. Illegal. Dangerous. Infuriating. My farm wasn't just property. It was work. Life. Sweat. The trenches she drove through held irrigation pipes. The soil she tore up had taken months to prepare. Every track she left behind cost me hours of fixing, reseeding, watering, and money I didn't have to waste. I didn't know it was her yet. Not until the morning I was filling feed buckets for the goats, and I heard the unmistakable hum of an SUV engine in the distance. A smooth, entitled hum too confident to be lost, too steady to be accidental. I stepped outside and saw dust rising from the far edge of the property. My jaw tightened. Whoever it was had done this before. I walked toward the rising dust cloud, heart thudding with a mixture of anger and disbelief. The sun was just starting to rise, spilling gold across the field, and for a moment everything looked almost calm. Picturesque. But the calm shattered as the vehicle burst into view, an oversized white luxury SUV barreling down the narrow dirt lane, kicking up dirt like it owned the ground beneath it. And then I saw her. Perfectly styled hair. Oversized sunglasses. One hand on the wheel, the other holding a coffee cup. And that expression, the signature Karen expression, like the universe itself owed her more space than anyone else. She didn't even slow down as she shot past me, not acknowledging me, not acknowledging that she was trespassing, again. That moment stuck with me. The utter indifference. Most people would at least look guilty. Or wave. Or stop to explain. But she didn't even glance at me. She drove through my property as if I wasn't standing there at all, like I was invisible in my own land. Like her convenience was more important than my rights, my safety, or my livelihood. That was the moment the story truly began. A simple question formed in my mind, as sharp as barbed wire. What happens when someone pushes you so hard, so repeatedly, that you finally stop trying to be reasonable? I followed the tracks after she left, tracing her path across my fields. She had cut right between the corn rows, then across the pumpkin patch, then toward the gravel road on the other side. A perfect straight line. Her personal shortcut. Her stolen convenience. All at my expense. The neighbors were no help. "Oh, that's just Karen," they said, as if that made it acceptable. "She's on the HOA board, you know how they are. No point confronting her, she'll just claim you threatened her. That woman thinks everything belongs to her." Their warnings weren't exaggerated. Karen had a reputation. The kind that drips out of people's voices when they speak her name. The kind that comes from years of small power, misused in big ways. She controlled the HOA like it was her personal kingdom, writing citations for mailbox heights, grass lengths, and even curtain colors, yet somehow believed she was entitled to ignore any rule that inconvenienced her. And now, she had decided that my farm, my private land, was her new drive-through lane. For a while, I tried being patient. I really did. The first time I tried to talk to her, I approached her respectfully at the community produce stand. She barely let me finish before cutting me off with, "I'm only passing through. It's not hurting anything." Then she turned away with the kind of dismissive wave usually reserved for shooing flies. But it was hurting things. It was hurting my crops, my soil, my irrigation lines, my livelihood. And her complete disregard made it sting even more. Days passed, and her shortcut became routine. Every morning, every evening. Sometimes twice in the afternoon. Tire tracks deepened. Soil compacted. Plants damaged. The disrespect grew louder each time those wheels rolled across my farm. And the worst part? The HOA sided with her. "You don't have proper fencing," they said. "That land looks open. She isn't causing structural damage. And the best one. She says she has permission." Permission. The word made my blood boil. Karen told them she had my informal approval. As if nodding at her once meant she owned my land. As if lying came naturally to her. That was when patience died, replaced by something colder. Not rage. Not hatred. Something sharper. A calm, calculated decision. If the HOA wouldn't enforce boundaries. If she wouldn't respect property. If words meant nothing to her. Then I would need to protect my land another way. I didn't start with spike strips. Not yet. First came the warnings. Big wooden signs, bright red paint, private property. Do not enter. She ignored them. Then came the chains across the entrance. She drove around them. Then came the logs blocking the path. She pushed them aside with her SUV. Then came the morning I found one of my goats limping, frightened, because she had nearly clipped it while tearing through the fields at high speed. That was the final straw, the moment the situation shifted from disrespect to danger. That evening, as the sun sank behind the fields and long shadows stretched across the earth, I stared down at the fresh tire tracks cutting through the corn. My jaw clenched. My hands curled into fists. Enough was enough. If Karen wanted a war, she had unknowingly declared one. And I was done fighting fair. The plan formed slowly at first, like a storm brewing on the horizon. Something practical. Something simple. Something that didn't involve confrontation, didn't involve shouting matches, didn't require the HOA's non-existent support. A way to remind her quietly, effectively, undeniably that my land was not a playground for her entitlement. I wasn't thinking about revenge. Not yet. I was thinking about boundaries. Safety. Respect. And how none of those things meant anything to Karen. But as the idea took shape in my mind, metal, sharp, unforgiving, I felt the tension in my chest loosen for the first time in weeks. A calm washed over me. A certainty. If she wanted to keep driving across my farm, she was about to pay the price for every track, every lie, every ounce of arrogance she had shoved into my life. The spike strips weren't vengeance. They were justice. And the moment I decided to set them up, nothing would ever be the same again. The decision sat in my mind like a stone at the bottom of a deep well, heavy, unmoving, impossible to ignore. Once I made it, there was no turning back. I walked the property that night under a sky split with stars, the kind of night so quiet you can hear your own thoughts echoing. And every thought led to the same conclusion: Karen wasn't stopping. She wasn't going to stop. Not unless something forced her to. The earth was still warm beneath my boots as I traced the exact path she always used, visualizing every twist and turn of her wheels. I knew her route better than she did by then. Every morning, every evening, without fail, she followed the same reckless line, as if she believed the world should rearrange itself around her convenience. That consistency, her arrogance, was going to make things very easy. But before taking action, I needed to be absolutely sure. Absolutely certain she wouldn't try to twist the truth again. Karen lied like she breathed effortlessly, constantly, and with the confidence of someone who expected the world to believe her simply because she said something. So I started observing. Not spying. Observing. Hidden behind the old oak trees or standing silently behind the tall corn, I'd watch her SUV barrel through the farm at the exact same times every single day. The way she gripped her coffee cup, the way she barely bothered to steer around irrigation lines, the way her sunglasses glinted with the kind of entitlement only years of getting her way can produce, every detail added to the portrait of someone who did not care. The viewing wasn't just about patterns, it was about understanding her. Knowing how she thought. Knowing how she'd react. Karen was predictable. Predictable people are dangerous, but also easy to outmaneuver. The final confirmation came one morning when she sped through so aggressively that the gravel sprayed across my boots, tiny stones stinging my shins like sharp little insults. She didn't slow. Didn't look. Didn't care. And as the dust cloud swallowed her, the decision turned final. Solid. Set in stone. Spike strips. But before anything else, I needed to test them. To make sure what I was about to install would do exactly what I needed: stop her, not destroy her. The goal wasn't to ruin her life. It was to make her understand the meaning of boundaries. In a way Karen couldn't misinterpret, twist, or lie about. So I spent the next few days crafting. Working silently in the barn long after the sun dipped below the horizon. Metal clinking, sparks flying, the scent of heated steel mixing with hay and dust. I ordered parts. Reinforced the frame. Ground the edges. Made sure the spikes were angled just right, not to flip a car, not to injure, but to make a point in the language Karen understood best: inconvenience. The strips were sturdy. Reliable. Undeniable. And as I held them in my hands, a strange calm washed over me, not satisfaction, not triumph, but relief. For the first time in weeks, I felt control returning to my life. My land. My peace. Still, part of me hesitated. There's a moment before every major decision, right before the action, where doubt creeps in like a shadow slipping under a door. I stood alone in the barn, listening to the night birds outside, and I asked myself a simple question. Was this too much? Was I crossing a line, becoming someone I didn't want to be? But then I thought of the goat she nearly hit. The crops she crushed. The lies she told. The way she made everyone else bend to her will, weaponizing the HOA as her personal shield. I thought of how she never once asked for permission, never apologized, never cared. And all doubt evaporated. Respect is earned. Boundaries are taught. And Karen had taught me that she only learned through consequences. The placement required precision. Not too close to the main entrance. Not too deep inside the property. Exactly where her tires always passed, right along the packed dirt path she treated like her private driveway. I spent hours measuring, marking, testing the ground with my boot to make sure it was firm enough to hide the strip without sinking. Every detail mattered. I buried the strip just enough so the spikes rested flush with the soil, invisible from a distance but effective the moment pressure hit. To anyone else the path looked like it always did: quiet, harmless, just another stretch of land. But beneath that harmlessness was a warning Karen could no longer ignore. As I worked, sweat dripped down my forehead, mixing with dust and determination. A hawk screeched overhead, circling slowly as if watching the entire operation. The sky was turning orange, the fields glowing with that warm, late afternoon fire, and I could feel the clock ticking. She'd be arriving soon. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But she would come. She always came. And when she did, she'd discover what happens when entitlement collides with consequences. But even with everything prepared, fate decided to throw one last twist my way. Because as I tested the placement one final time, I heard the faint, familiar rumble of an engine in the distance. Too early. She wasn't supposed to be here yet. My heart kicked hard in my chest. Was she coming now? Right this moment? Before I was fully ready? I crouched low, the dirt cool beneath my hands, listening. The engine hum grew louder, steady, confident, exactly like hers. The spike strip was set. The ground was ready. But I wasn't supposed to be here when she hit it. I needed distance. I needed to disappear. But it was already too late. The dust cloud was rising. The path vibrating. Her SUV bursting into view faster than expected. And I had nowhere to go. For a split second, everything froze. The strip hidden. The path set. The moment inevitable. Karen was coming full speed, full arrogance, full entitlement, and this time, nothing was going to save her from the consequences she had carved into my land. The moment stretched thin, so thin I felt it might snap like a wire pulled past its limit. Karen's SUV thundered toward me, the heavy engine roaring with the same arrogance she carried in her voice. Dust spiraled behind her like a comet tail, swallowing the golden light of late afternoon. And there I was, crouched like a trespasser on my own land, heart pounding in my throat with a rhythm too fast to be calm, too steady to be panic. I didn't plan for this. I didn't plan to witness the very first moment the spike strips did their job. I wanted distance, wanted the event to happen cleanly, silently, without the complication of being seen. But fate doesn't always wait for perfect timing. Sometimes it pushes you straight into the moment you thought you could avoid. My pulse hammered as her SUV sped closer, the ground vibrating beneath me. I ducked low, slipping behind the thick trunk of a fallen log, my breath shallow, my fingers digging into the dirt. I could hear the crunch of gravel, the hum of rubber slicing over dust, the confident acceleration she always applied when she thought she was somewhere she belonged. 40 yards. 30. 20. I could see her face through the windshield now, sunglasses on, lips pursed, hair perfect in that stiff, unmoving helmet of hairspray. She wasn't even looking at the road. She was yelling at someone on her Bluetooth, waving her free hand with frustration, like the world itself refused to meet her standards. 10 yards. There was no going back. And then it happened. A violent thump, sharp, metallic, unmistakable. The sound sliced through the air like a crack of lightning. Her front tires hit the spike strip dead on. The result was instant. A loud pop echoed across the field, followed by a deep, wobbling groan as the SUV lurched violently. The front end dipped hard to the right. Dust erupted around the vehicle in a swirling cloud as the rubber shredded itself on the hidden metal teeth, ripping apart like fabric under a blade. Karen screamed. A high, raw sound that carried across the land far louder than the explosion of air. Her coffee cup flew. Her sunglasses slid crooked. The entire SUV swerved, jerking erratically as both front tires collapsed within seconds. She slammed the brakes, creating long, chaotic skid marks across the dirt before the vehicle finally dragged itself to a stop, the front bumper nearly kissing the earth. Silence fell. A heavy, stunned silence that sat thick in the air. For a moment, I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Didn't even blink. I had prepared for this. Planned for it. Expected it. But seeing it unfold, seeing her physically confront the consequences she'd been dodging for weeks, hit me harder than I expected. Not guilt. Not satisfaction. Something more complicated. Something colder. Something final. Karen stumbled out of the SUV, gasping, angry, shaken, yet somehow still wearing an expression that screamed, "How dare this happen to me?" Her perfect composure was shattered, pieces of her entitlement scattered across the dirt like broken glass. She stared at the ruined tires as if they had personally betrayed her. Hands on her hips. Face twisted with disbelief. Mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Then came the moment I knew was inevitable. The shift. The transformation. Karen's shock hardened into something sharper: anger, entitlement, righteousness. She whipped her head around, scanning the entire field, searching for someone, anyone to blame. Her voice cracked through the quiet. Who did this? Her shout echoed across the field, bouncing off trees and farm tools and fences like an accusation hurled into the sky. She paced around the front of her SUV, examining the flattened rubber, kneeling down to touch the strips of shredded tire as if trying to understand the physics of consequences. This is illegal. This is a crime. Someone is going to pay for this. I stayed perfectly still. Hidden. Silent. A ghost in my own land. Because this wasn't the moment to reveal myself. Not yet. If I stepped out now, the story would warp instantly. Karen would twist it, bend it, weaponize it. She'd claim I attacked her. Claim she feared for her life. Claim she was just passing through, like she always did. She needed to face the moment alone. To feel it. To understand it. So I watched quietly as she paced, as she ranted, as she called someone on her phone with frantic urgency. I could hear her voice, shrill and trembling. Send a tow truck immediately. And I want the HOA president on the line now. This man is a menace. He's trying to kill me. I almost laughed. Kill her? The spike strips weren't hidden in some pit. They didn't flip her car. They didn't send her flying. They simply forced her to stop traveling through a place she had no right to be. But entitlement doesn't understand logic. It only understands inconvenience as an attack. Minutes passed. Karen stomped around, occasionally shouting into the phone or muttering angrily to herself. Her perfect morning ritual shattered. Her routine disrupted. Her shortcut destroyed. The whole time, I remained hidden. Watching. Waiting. Thinking. And as her SUV sagged on the flattened rubber, as her voice echoed across the land, as her fury filled the air, I realized something important. This wasn't the climax. This wasn't the end. This was only the beginning. Because Karen wasn't the type to accept consequences. She wasn't the type to reflect, apologize, or learn. No, she was the type to escalate. And as I watched her fume and rage beside her crippled vehicle, I knew I had awakened something in her. Something vindictive. Something dangerous. The war she had silently started the day she cut across my field had just become official. The spike strips weren't the end of the story. They were the spark. And the fire was just beginning to burn. Karen did not leave quietly. The tow truck arrived an hour later, an hour filled with her pacing in furious circles, waving her arms, stomping her feet, shouting into her phone, and occasionally shooting dagger-like glares at the empty horizon, still searching for the invisible culprit she believed was hiding nearby. She wasn't wrong about that. But she'd never guess how close I truly was. When the tow truck rumbled across the gravel road and pulled onto the farm entrance, I watched as the driver stepped out slowly, taking in the scene with a tired, almost defeated sigh. He clearly knew Karen. Everyone in the area did. The kind of knowing that comes with years of forced interactions and forced politeness. Karen stormed toward him like a hurricane wrapped in designer sunglasses, her voice already raised before she'd even reached him. This is a trap. A trap on private property. I could have died. I want this entire area investigated. I want the owner charged. This is attempted murder. The driver only blinked. Then scratched his beard. Then looked at the deflated tires with the expression of someone who had seen far worse from far less dramatic people. Ma'am, he said, these are spike strips. Yes, I know they're spike strips. Someone put them here. He nodded slowly, like he was talking to a child who hadn't yet mastered basic logic. Well, usually spike strips don't just appear on land unless someone wants to stop a car from being on it. Karen recoiled as if he had slapped her. How dare you imply this is my fault? I have every right to pass through here. It's practically a public pathway. This is a farm, he replied, gesturing wearily at the crops. You can't just. She cut him off immediately. "I want this reported to the HOA. And the police. And the county. And," she sputtered as if running out of air, "and everyone will know about this." And she meant it. I knew she did. As the tow truck pulled her SUV away crooked, embarrassed, wounded, I watched her climb into the passenger seat with a final furious snap of her seat belt. Her expression burned with promise. Not of surrender. Of retaliation. The moment the truck disappeared down the road, I stepped out from my hiding place, dust brushing off my clothes. The spike strip lay twisted where the SUV had dragged it a few feet. I lifted it from the dirt, the metal gleaming beneath a thin coat of dust. A tool that had done its job. But the job wasn't done. Not by a long shot. I brought it back to the barn and hung it from the hook where I'd forged it, the way a warrior might mount a used shield. I cleaned the dirt from my hands, pacing slowly across the wooden floor as the reality of what was coming sank into my bones. Karen would not let this go. And she proved that faster than I expected. It started with a letter nailed to my mailbox the next morning. A formal HOA complaint printed on the kind of stiff paper only people who believe too deeply in their own importance use. I unfolded it slowly, reading each perfectly typed word while the rooster crowed in the background. Unauthorized hazardous devices. Endangerment of community members. Destruction of HOA property. Failure to maintain safe passage. Safe passage? On my farm? A bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. And at the bottom, in bold, "You are required to attend an emergency HOA hearing within 24 hours. Of course Karen had pushed this through. She lived on that board like a queen perched on a velvet throne. But that wasn't the real punch. The real punch came at the bottom, written in aggressive, looping handwriting. "You won't get away with this. K." Subtlety had never been her strength. I crushed the paper in my fist, feeling anger coil tight in my chest. Not because of the meeting. Not because of the lies. Not even because of the accusation. It was the entitlement. The audacity of someone who had trespassed, lied, and endangered animals acting as though I was the villain. I knew this meeting wouldn't be fair. Karen would twist everything. The board would listen to her. Rules, logic, evidence, none of it mattered to people drunk on small power. But I wasn't going to walk in unprepared. I gathered photos of the tire tracks. Photos of the signs she ignored. Footage from the trail cameras she didn't know existed. Even the damaged irrigation pipe from the day she nearly hit the goat. By noon, I had everything in a folder thick enough to flatten a table. Still, even with all the evidence, I couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. A quiet, crawling discomfort that settled deep in my gut. Because logic said I should win this fight. But Karen didn't use logic. She used manipulation, influence, and performance. And the HOA ate it up like candy. That night, as the sun melted behind the hills, I sat on the porch staring at the fields she had violated, the earth still scarred with the fresh tire marks of her final drive. My jaw tightened.